Training Hacks and part 2 in our series on creating a consistent backswing. Now, consistent shot making requires that you start in a good position, and for a golfer that means your address, your takeaway, and your backswing. That's why it's so important to get those things right, because good luck getting back to impact with some consistency if you don't get those things right. When we're talking about a consistent backswing, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about rotating around a neutral, stable spine and maintaining certain spine angles. That's so important, because if you can't rotate around a neutral, stable spine and you don't hit the correct spine angles in your backswing, you're going to add a lot of variability to your swing. Maybe you're going to have an early wrist set, maybe you're going to pull your elbow back too far to get the club back, maybe you have a reverse C, maybe you start standing up too early in your backswing. All those things add variability. And with more variability, it becomes very difficult to get the impact consistently. I mean, if you're moving all around, your arms, your hands, your back, it's really tough to get back to where you started. So it's important to get your backswing consistent. And as we said in part 1, since your spine sits on your pelvis, if your pelvis is misaligned, your spine is going to be misaligned. And if your spine is misaligned, it's really tough to hit those spine angles and keep that backswing consistent. So we really want to work on hip alignment. So in part 1, we worked on hip flexor function, because your hip flexors are very important to pelvic alignment. When your hip flexors are tight, they pull your pelvis too far forward. That's anterior pelvic tilt. And unfortunately, for a lot of recreational golfers, their hip flexors are too tight. Now, how does that happen? Well, for example, if you sit a lot, your hip flexors are going to be chronically shortened and contracted. That's because muscles adapt to positions and movement. So if you have chronic movement or chronic positions, your muscles are going to adapt to that. So when you're sitting, your hip flexors are always shortened, and then they're going to adapt to that, and they're going to stay shortened and contracted. And that's actually, just because they're stiff and tight doesn't mean they're strong. The length-tension relationship of those muscles are distorted, and they're actually weaker. But that's not the whole story when you're talking about aligning your hips, because your glute max muscle is very important to pelvic alignment. Your psoas, your hip flexors, and your glute max work together, among other things, to align your hips correctly. But there's something that happens when your hip flexors are in a shortened, contracted state chronically. And that's because the neurological system is set up in this way. When a muscle contracts around a joint, its functional opposite gets a signal to relax a little bit, right? That makes sense. If all the muscle around a joint contracted equally with the same force for the same amount of time, there'd be no movement. That's an isometric contraction. So to move, one muscle contracts, the other muscle relaxes a little bit, to put it simply. So when your hip flexors are chronically shortened and contracted, there's a signal sent to the glute max muscle to relax a little bit. Now, since the glute max muscle is responsible for pulling that pelvis back into alignment, if it has a weaker signal, it's going to be tougher to do that. Now, compounding that is the fact that if you sit a lot, you've weakened your glute max muscle and your abdominals as well. So not only is there a weaker signal in the glute max to pull that hip back into alignment, but it's just in general weaker. So you have this combination of effects that's creating a misalignment. Now, when your hips are misaligned, it sends dysfunction up and down the kinetic chain. In this video, we're going to continue working on your hip alignment, and Cheryl and I are going to show you a simple technique to activate your glute max, to get a stronger neural signal into that glute max so that it's better able to readjust your pelvis and put it back into alignment. So we're going to show you how to use the psoas activation technique in combination with the glute max activation technique to align your hips. And what you're going to see is that not only do your hips align better, but other things improve, like hamstring range of motion. And hamstring range of motion, your hamstring flexibility can be improved without even stretching by using these techniques. So let's get started working on those hips. We're going to show you how you can increase your hamstring range of motion without stretching. And we do this through neurolymphatic points. And I'll explain what those are in a minute. But first, we're going to test Cheryl's hamstring range of motion, because when you do these, you want to test and retest, because then you would have no basis of knowing how this works. So Cheryl's going to relax her leg, and when you do this on somebody, you want them to have a relaxed leg. I feel her weight here, And then we're going to get her range of motion, and she's, you know, right about there. That's about where I feel some resistance. Okay, so now we're going to show you what the neurolymphatic points are to improve the impulse into your glute max and into your actually your hip flexors. So Cheryl's going to do them right now, and I'm going to show you what they are. Okay, so to improve the glute max impulse, you have 2 points in the back of your head, and all you have to do is rub these points. Okay, so you're just rubbing them for about 20 or 30 seconds, and Cheryl's going to go through it, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. The other point is right here in your jaw, and you're going to put your finger inside your jaw, and you're going to just press until, you know, it's not ralphing, you don't have to press really hard. You just kind of press where your finger kind of meets the tissue, the muscles. And you're going to press one side and the other. 30 seconds, 40 seconds, a minute, you know, you don't have to go too long. So that's for the glute max. Now the other area is for your hip flexors, and they're very important. Now a hip flexor is a psoas muscle, it's P-S-O-A-S, right? It attaches inside your thigh, and it bowstrings over your hip and goes into your lumbar spine. It's a really important muscle because it attaches into your lumbar spine. So we want to get that very activated as well. Now, to do this, you find your belly button, you go to the right and to the left of it, and again, you're just kind of palpating or rubbing or whatever you want to call it, where your fingers meet the tissue. You're not pressing that hard. It's almost a surface type of thing. And Cheryl's going to continue to do that for a while. Neurolymphatic points actually improve the neural drive into your muscles because they're clearing up your synapses. Now the synapses is that little gap between the motor unit, which is the muscle, and then the nerve that's coming in. There's a little gap. Sometimes it gets filled with some lymphatic fluid. There are probably other reasons why this procedure works, this technique works, but you know, essentially the neurolymphatic points are the key to this. Okay, so Cheryl has activated her glute max. Now what's going to happen is the glute max now is activated, and it's going to realign her pelvis so that that hamstring isn't pulling so much, it's relaxed, and now we're going to get some instant range of motion. Okay, so relax, Cheryl, and now you're going to see it goes right up. Okay, so try it for yourself. Okay, the points behind your head, in here, to the left and right of your belly button, you know, 30, 40, 50 seconds is all you need. Try it for yourself. If you're really interested in these activations, you really have to look into the website Reflexive Performance Reset. It's run by 2 great coaches, Chris Korfus and Cal Dietz. We love them. We followed them for many years at Inner Strength Sports Conditioning. We use a lot of their techniques. If this is of interest to you, I highly recommend their courses. So thanks for watching.